When you actually come out and you start to actually speak to people and cross out of your own boundary of what you think you know, which is why at Conscious Economics, we're always like, look around right now. Look at all the mix of everyone that's here, like all ages, all backgrounds, all different kinds of careers, all different styles and ways that we think and breathe and feel coming together. And when we look around, we all are happy to be here together. And so the assumptions that we make, every business, big major business person doesn't care about the world. That's not true. Or corporate is this. No, it's not. There are people just like me and you everywhere. And if we start to actually open ourselves up and believe and start to ask ourselves the question, not how bad is it going to get, how fucking good can it get? How fucking good can it get? If we actually start to work and try, it can get good. I want it good. I want it good for my kids. I want it good for all of you. And it's going to take generations to clean this place up. Generations. But it has to start now. Look at it. We have got to start. This is the Conscious Economics Podcast, and I'm your host, Rhiannon Rosalind. This is the place where we explore people, planet, profit, and art through the lens of the new economy. If you're interested in changing yourself, getting more creative, or changing the system at large, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other week as we explore these topics with amazing guests. We'll go deep, we'll go heart-centered and soul-felt as we go into how we change ourselves and change the world. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Conscious Economics Podcast. I am so grateful for you tuning in for this episode this week, which is actually an episode that we recorded live in person in front of our beautiful community audience just a few weeks ago when we launched the Mindfulness and Money annual membership program that I know many of you have been asking about. So this episode is actually featuring myself and our in-house financial therapist, Aseel El-Baba, as we have a really beautiful conversation all under the umbrella of what we call economic healing. So you'll be able to really feel like you had a front seat at this particular event activation where Aseel and I explore money through multiple lenses, really going deep in understanding the subconscious. And what was really special about the way that we did this is Aseel is, of course, a financial therapist and really knows how to go deep into the personal ways that money can intersect with different aspects of our life. And for me, I am someone who is obviously always thinking in terms of the conscious economics philosophy. So I was able to take those same intersections and look at them through the collective, look at them through a systemic approach and lens. So it's a really special episode. I hope you enjoy it and you get something out of it. And that is that. Have fun and enjoy. Do you feel the love in the room tonight? Do you feel some love? I'm feeling some love. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you why I think some of that love is here, because this organization and the whole movement of conscious economics, it was started with love. And it was started with my husband and I, Dr. Jeffrey Overall, who's here. And we were both in business and in the world of economics and finance, Jeff being a professor, me running this big economic platform. And when we had our own little awakenings where we started to recognize and realize that there was more to life and we wanted more. And we started to get really hungry and trying to understand, why are we here? Why are we on this planet? And what are we here to really do? It's not just to pay a bunch of bills and accumulate a bunch of stuff and then kick off. There's got to be something more. And so we went on this journey all around the world and got to sit with elders and indigenous, wise, incredible people all across the planet, and really learning about consciousness and how we could expand ours and expand our love. And we co-founded Conscious Economics. And I want to say a special thank you to our incredible team, Davin, of course, Joel, who you met, Jackie, Aseel, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But thank you so much to all of the people who continue to support this movement, all of you that are coming out. It was a risk. It was a risk to kind of say, let's just jump away from everything we were doing before and try something different. But we are at this stage in our world where it is time to try something different. And I really, really believe deeply that business can be a vehicle for social change, that money and healing our relationship to money can actually help us to start building the kind of world that I know we want to build. And so the pillars of the conscious economy are people, planet, profit, and art. And just to kind of explain that really gently, on the people side, it's about the well-being of people. And that's not about drinking green juices and like playing ping pong at work, which is kind of how like it's been interpreted in some of the corporate culture. It's about our mind, body, and spirit being well and healthy and nourished. It's about people being able to heal and be heard, and all of the pain being seen, the truth being revealed. That's how we get better. That's how we heal. When we talk about the planet side, it's not just about straws and ESG jargon. It's about reconnecting to nature. It's about having a relationship with nature. That's where it starts. When we get back out into nature and we connect and we think about business from those terms, something starts to shift. And on the profit side, we got to heal our relationship with money. Like, I really deeply recognize that, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. But that's why we offer these programs. That's why we offer this space, so that we can start to do that, because it's a big hindrance to us not building the kind of world that we want, because we're afraid. We're afraid of what money might do if we get it. We're afraid of what we can't do if we don't have it. And what we really need to realize is that there are multiple currencies to the new economy, and community is one of them. So being here in community is a start. And the last pillar is art. And it's not just about music, it's about the art that lives inside every single one of you. Because as human beings, we all have a creative energy and something to give to this world. It may be the way you do your accounting. I'm trying to artfully lay in the sun on the couch on Sundays now. It's like my new thing. But these are important concepts. And it's a true honor for me to present and to be here tonight and to open up the floor to my incredible partner and co-founder, Aseel. And so, Aseel, come on up, and then I'm going to tell a little story about Aseel. So how this all got started, I'm just going to tell the story and then we're going to launch into it, okay? So as I mentioned, I was running the Economic Club of Canada for over a decade, which is a very, very powerful, prominent business platform. And I was also doing financial literacy work, so doing financial education programs across the country. And when the pandemic hit, I sat with myself, and many of us entrepreneurs got hit in the face by the pandemic. Many of us, artists, entrepreneurs, our businesses were shut down. Mine was. We were a live events-driven organization, so we were doing 100 events a year across the country at an incredible pace. And when it all stopped, and I realized that I had spent all of the buffer, I didn't have enough in the coffers to keep things afloat. And I felt incredibly responsible to my very large team at that time. And I know that everyone was going through something, but I internalized it. I internalized it and started to sit with myself and think about how really shitty I really am and was with money, and what a fraud I felt like. Because I had been traveling all around the country, teaching all kinds of people about money. And while I knew all of the important things, I wasn't always applying them myself. And I was extremely risky with money, and I had all kinds of behaviors that were not helpful. And And as I sat and I faced myself on many fronts, I felt like I had no choice but to out myself. And so because of my position and because of some of the connections that I had the privilege of outing myself nationally in the Globe and Mail. I wrote an op-ed and I sent it to the editor-in-chief and I said, "Will you print this?" And he said, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "I'm sure. I want to do this." And I get a little emotional, which is perfect because this is the space that we're in. But when I wrote that article, it was the most raw and honest that I had been. And remember what the organization I ran. So I risked my reputation. I risked everything. But I was starting this new leaf where I want to build from real. And what I was suffering from was financial trauma, and I didn't have the words for that at the time. And when I wrote the article, Aseel had multiple people send her this article, and I had never heard of a financial therapist before. I didn't know that that existed. And all of a sudden, here comes this like amazing woman who is literally speaking my exact language, but not even from the space of, oh, she's the financial therapist who figured it all out. She also spoke from this very raw place of what drove her to the work, which I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute. But when we came together in that first call, and I still remember, and like full bawling, crying our eyes out, I started to work with Aseel myself. She really, really helped me start to kind of unpack and understand some of the subconscious stuff and some of the deep trauma that I was dealing with money, and that it was okay. And with that, we started to want to bring this to the world, and it fit and it made a lot of sense for what we were doing with conscious economics. So all these years later, and many iterations and trial and error and crying and jumping off cliffs almost, we're here tonight with something that we're really proud of, which is Mindfulness and Money. I'm honored to work with you, my dear sister.
I just don't have the words to describe my gratitude to you as well, and to this mission, and to this team, and to every single person in this room. There's nothing around that you see from the decoration or anything. Every single thing here is super intentional and thought through, including who's here with us to launch this Mindfulness and Money membership and the Mindfulness and Money movement. So thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Thank you.
So just a couple of things. I'm going to explain what we're about to do. So we had a jar, and then it broke and it cut Jackie's finger, and that was a tragedy in and of itself. So I have this old really gross thing from the house, babe, and it's filled with guts of flowers on the inside because I didn't think we were going to use it. So we've shoved little pieces of paper in this flower gut thing, and using the power of synchronicity, we're going to pull out these little topics, and we don't know which ones we'll pull out.
We put a whole bunch of topics that intersect with money, because money, let's face it, intersects with everything in our life, from personal experiences that we go through to global events that we continue to witness. So we just put a whole bunch of topics in that jar. Some are micro, some are macro. And we said, let's synchronicity choose what we should talk about today. So we're going to just trust the guidance around that and pick topics as we go and discuss them with you. And you'll obviously have a chance to engage with us at the end, where you get to ask us questions and just share feedback and share your thoughts, and also share your stories, because a big part of our mission and our slogan is that healing happens in community. And a big part of that is giving space for our stories to be heard. So your voice is definitely part of tonight as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to do this, and what our plan was, because it's so interesting that whenever Aseel and I get together, because Aseel is a financial therapist, she's really able to take it down to the personal level and really help with practical ways of how it applies to an individual. And because I have spent so much time on the systemic change side of things, I end up kind of coming from this big conscious whole economy viewpoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to share what comes from us and our teachings to you this way. So,
okay, the first one, aging.
Aging?
Why is that
Oh
the first
my,
one?
I don't
Holy moly.
know.
I actually started witnessing
White hair?
and yes, white hair.
Okay, well,
Money and aging. Okay. So the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear that is a lot of my clients start experiencing anxieties around certain milestones and what they think they should have accomplished by then. Like by 30, I should have accumulated this much. By 40, I should have accumulated this much. And a lot of these shoulds come from various things from what you heard and grew up witnessing in your family, what the expectation is. Some of it is cultural reinforcement. And it creates a whole bunch of anxiety. And there was actually a formula in The Millionaire Next Door of how much money you should accumulate by a certain age. I now forget what the formula is, but it was very intimidating to actually think about. And it really kept reinforcing the fact that there are financial milestones that do align with our age. And I don't even know how these things came to be. And especially when we live in metropolitan cities around the world, we tend to start comparing ourselves to others as well. And the more gaps we start experiencing between us and our friends as we continue to go on different career paths, the more it impacts our self-worth. And the correlation between self-worth and net worth are significantly heightened in metropolitan cities. It's very interesting to see these particular internalization of who I am and what I'm worth based on what I've accumulated by certain ages. So this is one of the first things that come to mind when I think about money and aging. Another piece is when I think about people approaching retirement, there's also a whole bunch of different expectations or realizations that people start thinking about as they approach retirement. Like, what is retirement? As a financial planner, I have some colleagues here that are in that space. We used to ask these questions, like, what does retirement mean for you? What does it look like? And a lot of people just never thought these questions through, or at least thought about it from a very myopic standpoint about how much money I need to accumulate to sustain a certain lifestyle. But there's also something really important to start thinking about overall holistic approach to what retirement looks like for everybody. And because we are very short-term thinkers, retirement for a lot of us is very, very foggy and very unclear in our brain, which is why we're not wired to think that far ahead into our future. And there's actually 7 different time frames that we fall under. There's 2 types of past, 2 types of presents, 2 types of futures, and then transcendental future, which is what we think happens after we die. And each one of these time frames impacts the decisions we have. So sometimes we're making a decision out of the past, sometimes we're making a decision out of the future. And it's interesting to see that as we age, our emphasis on any of these time frames shifts. So people who tend to be older, actually a lot of them live in the past and or start thinking about like nearing death. So it's varying for different people, but that's also something to keep in mind about what time frame am I currently in as I make this decision. So that's another piece.
Thank you for that. When I reflect on the intersection of aging and money, there's a couple of things that come up. One, I think about the different generations. And I think about our young generation right now, millennial, Gen Z, under, and how many of us have opted out of corporate careers because there are systemic issues as to why many people don't feel called to work in those settings. And because of that, the retirement, that's usually the retirement plan and financial incentives and structure, many people have lost because many of us are gig economy workers. Like, how many of you would classify as a gig worker or as an entrepreneur? There's a lot of us, right? So especially for those that identify that way, this concept of retirement, we don't have the confidence or the understanding of how to get there because many are just making ends meet with where we currently are. So in survival mode and in a state of nervous system being on overdrive, that just feels like let's put it away. It's another thing to shove under the rug and give us anxiety, honestly, when it's brought up. I also, for some reason, associate talking about like retirement with like an angry dad, and it's not mine. But I picture like this angry dad. I don't know why, but it's the way that I personally feel around some of the traditional sort of financial and banking and all of that advice. It just feels like I'm in trouble. And I know that's probably my own trauma speaking, but it's something that I reflect on. On the other end of it, I think that, and Aseel brought up his grandfather, and he brought up being in a long-term care facility. And I think about how we deal with aging in our country and around the world, and in particular here, though, in the West, how we like to kind of hide it or push it away. It's like we don't want to confront or face it. And I think and reflect on, stories that women are often told around our worth and our value not being there as we age. And I just want to rewrite that so deeply. And I know those of you that hang around me like know how much I love grandmothers. And I hope that one day I get to be one, and not pressure on my children, but just to be in my wisdom and to honor aging as the most beautiful currency, and to actually rewrite the story of what that is. And I hope that we see a group of young entrepreneurs that are so hungry to want to create change in that space.
I love that you said aging as a currency, which brings me back to something Rhiannon and I did, where we were thinking about what kind of logos we want to choose to the 4 pillars she introduced earlier. We thought about the profit logo should be a rainbow, because we introduced 7 currencies. When we're wired to just think about money as a currency and a resource, it's not hard to imagine why we feel scarce when we're not happy with what's in the bank account. But when we start expanding our understanding of all the different currencies we all have access to, including social capital, which everybody in this room has, like friends and community and family and health and your access to planet. But now that you added aging, like the wisdom you carry with you, your education, your natural skill set, all these pieces are resources. And we're also trying to rewrite that story to expand what resources even mean and how much we have. We have more than we think.
100%. So let's do another one. What is it?
Sexuality.
Come on.
Money and sex. We're going there. You start.
So again, I think that if we think about it from the systemic side, some of the things that we're most uncomfortable speaking about is sexuality and money. And it's really interesting because both things are absolutely necessary for all of us to be here, quite literally. But these are the things that we feel so taboo about, that we feel so uncomfortable about. So because of that, I feel like we don't get access to the stories and understand what people's struggles are, what works for them or what doesn't. And so that's what I think about. And I think that creating spaces like this where we can start to open up and speak more directly to these things is important as we grow, as we come out of an age and a society and an economy where there was a lot of secrets, I feel, and a lot of like old ideological programming that doesn't really serve where we are headed. So that's one of the things I think of. But you've got way more specific stuff, so I'm going to let you.
Well, money and sex are both part of our creative force. They show up differently, but they are how we create in this world. And what's interesting about looking at financial trauma is that it's actually showing up patterns that naturally reflect in other areas in our life. So when we're having, for example, patterns of deprivation or lack of self-worth or feeling secretive and shameful or guilty about some of the things that we want or ask for, they tend to show up in these areas quite literally. So it's interesting to reflect on these patterns. Like, how am I showing up in the budget and the bedroom? That's a workshop idea that we've had it for a while, but we wanna do that.
She's dying to get that out.
So that's one angle, and the other angle is actually what happens with our sex drive as we earn money or actually stop earning money. Like, there's different ways in how we show up within our relationship and how comfortable we are with our intimacy that correlates with our financial fluctuations as well. So that's a different angle to explore. how one of the things that you and I talked about is when we're in the hustle culture and we're constantly chasing after the dollar, it literally restricts our ability to relax and open up intimately in our lives and in our relationships. So there's also a lot of impact on money trauma and the impact it has on that.
Well, and we have done some talks about that in workshops around this idea that, yeah, we are in overdrive. So the way that the system is designed right now is for us to be working all the time, incredibly hard, competitive. And it drains the force that wants to open or relax or accept pleasure. And so we get into these really caught up moments. And for me, I struggled with that so much, in running my businesses, where the pressure of being an entrepreneur, the pressure of, figuring out the finances and making sure everyone was taken care of, my nervous system was so wound up that I just lost any desire to do anything other than work and worry. And that's such a truth for so many of us. And it's even worse when your business or the work that you're doing is something that you are incredibly passionate about, or that you deeply feel is, here to help the world in some way, because then we can excuse it almost like this is my dharma. I have to do this. And it actually is quite toxic. So that's another way that we get robbed of that pleasure. Okay. This one's inner child.
Inner child. Mm-hmm. Okay. So one of the therapy techniques or modalities, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, it's called internal family systems. But even if you're not familiar, we all have different parts of us. Recently, there's been much more awareness on the concept of therapy. So the concept of inner child may start to be familiar to a lot of you. But the reason we wrote that down, I remember, is because a lot of the times, money situations today awake the inner child within us. So think about how a wounded child sits. Like you're literally sitting in the corner with your fetal position like that. You're hovered over. And that is a way to kind of protect yourself from the world. You're shielding yourself from the world. So even though today you could be the adult who's in your 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, whenever financial trauma or a trigger, it doesn't have to be trauma, even though our trauma has to be misunderstood sometimes because we imagine big events, but really we've all faced all sorts of different traumas in our life. But the idea is whatever financial trigger you're facing, it could be going into a store and looking up the price tag of a shirt you really want and recognizing that, pinch, it's gonna not be something you're comfortably able to buy. Or it could be a conversation with your boss trying to negotiate a promotion or a salary increase. Or it could be talking about what your kids want. Your kids want certain items for the winter. Or talking about your partner with money. Like maybe you started out earning your partner and you're trying to keep that as a secret because you're worried about what that make them feel. So all sorts of ways, all these different pieces bring out this inner child in us because it brings up the part of us that is fearful. And especially because the first 7 years of our upbringing are the years that we absorbed a lot of these internalized messages we saw and witnessed in our parents and how they talked about money and in school and society. So these moments that we're experiencing in our 40s or 50s or 30s, wherever age you are, bring us back to that moment. So you're not acting out of the wise person you are today. That part of you is the person taking the center stage. So there's different personas within us. The wounded child is one, the rebellious teenager, the critical parent, and the wise adult. These are 4 really major ones. So in any of the financial decisions that you can reflect on, you wonder which part was in charge in that moment. It's usually one of these main 4 characters. And another thing I'll quickly add is that when you start this work, it's common for it to be in hindsight. You're looking back at a situation and you're trying to analyze it. But as you get more in the process of working through these things, it becomes more in real time. You start noticing it in real time. And as you become even more equipped with it, you can start being proactive and making sure that you're supporting yourself in such a way where you're showing up as the wise adult to a meeting with your boss versus a wounded child who's frozen or who's fearful or who's acting like a tantrum, like you may be putting a tantrum, and that's why, because you're triggered in these moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I reflect on it, I just think that it sounds so of the now to start talking about, inner child, and therapy and all the access to that is so different than what it was even 5-10 years ago. There's so much more normalization around it. But just personally for me, some of the deepest healing that I've been able to have around my relationship to money has come from really understanding what was the programming of my childhood, what did I witness growing up, what were the patterns and behaviors that were displayed, and how are those impacting me? And they do, and they are. And all it takes is just sitting down and actually reviewing it and seeing it to really start to witness. And usually it's a variety basket of things that we pick up. Some of the things might be great, some of them might be wonderful, and some of them might not be so helpful. For me, there's certain parts that I picked up that I'm really grateful for. I have a very high tolerance to risk because I grew up with a bunch of uncles that went to the racetrack all the time. I literally grew up at the racetrack. So it was gambling and and big wins and losses. And I was all right, I internalized that. So in business, I rolled the dice pretty big. Jeff knows, he's looking at me, and I'll just be we should try this and blah. And then the big losses. And, I was on that ride all the time through business thinking, this is just entrepreneurship. This is what it is. But when I actually started to do the work, I was oh man, I picked up some wacky stuff from these guys. I'm picturing Doug and just, it's true. Richard has some better things that I probably should have spent more time picking up from you, a little bit more on it. And then I think my mom, when I reflect on her, she was super scared of debt and super scared of credit and felt very overwhelmed by that. So didn't get into that. And that wasn't what I took on, but it was an interesting thing because when I found myself in these situations, I felt very ashamed that I didn't want her to know.
I'm really, really glad you brought that word, ashamed. The reason this work is really important is because when we tend to think about our financial decisions that aren't logical or things we're not proud of, we tend to be very critical, and that's why it's shameful, and that's why there's a lot of guilt, and that's why we struggle in silence. But when we start understanding how we came about to be this way, we now approach it from a much more loving space of self-love, and it's the whole shift is created in such a way that offers room for healing. And I remember prior to me quitting the bank and starting this journey in financial therapy, I had an executive person in my office where he was an accountant, okay? This person knew numbers inside out. He did brilliant at his job, and his personal finances were such a mess that how do these two things coexist? But when I started digging deeper into what's happening here, this person could not say no to his children. His children were all adults, but he engaged in what we call financial enabling, which means, that's when helping starts hurting you, and you can't say no to your children. And when we dig deeper into that, he told me he grew up with a dad from the Depression era that was so cheap to the point that it ruined their relationship. And now he was living in a rebellious mode where he said, I never want to do this to my kids. But he went to the other side of this overcorrection because he never dealt with that trauma and understanding how his dad's parenting impacted their relationship. And now this person was remortgaging his house a few years before retiring. So that's the impact of this work. And that's how, this person would have never, as an executive, an accountant, would you ever talk about this openly? There's a lot of shame in it. Mm-hmm. And that's why these spaces are important, to bring awareness to the full picture.
And I was surprised on that note, when I outed myself, I was surprised how many people that were very senior level executives, many of them on Bay Street, who were this is it. And so it's so interesting when we actually start to bring truth.
We can talk about any of these topics for hours, but
for sure.
But I want to also say, I'm a financial therapist, and I continue to struggle in this every single day. Just yesterday, she coached me actually.
I gave her own medicine.
She gave me my own medicine.
It was very powerful what I said to her.
It
changed her life.
I'll share it because it did. we had an opportunity to go speak somewhere. And I really always want to support, especially nonprofit organizations. And I said, Rhiannon, they're offering us this much. It's better than nothing. And she said, look at what you're saying. You're comparing a small amount with nothing as if these are the only options you have. And this is part of the scarcity that comes up for me. I struggled a lot with scarcity mentality, and I continue to do so. And I share that openly because just because I'm on this path doesn't mean that I'm like far ahead of anybody. The pain of this is real, and it shows up in like every situation. And another situation came up for me just the other day. I was giving my son blueberries, and I said, I didn't want to give, like, I'm like, these blueberries are $10. I'm not going to have any. It's for him. And I'm like, wait, like, am I now living in this way where like, I only want to take care of my son when I'm coaching mothers all day long to like make space for both themselves and their kids? And just noticing how these things like run in the background, but also recognizing they're not mine. I grew up witnessing that, but I don't have to adopt it, internalize it, and continue on that journey. I just recognize it and let it go with the love and the intention of healing without clinging on it. So please forgive yourself for all the stuff that comes up for you.
Mm-hmm. This podcast is brought to you by Mindfulness and Money. Mindfulness and Money is our new annual membership program designed to meet you where you are at and thoughtfully help you heal your issues with money. Join Aseel El-Baba, our in-house financial therapist, and myself, Rhiannon and Rosalind, as we help you uncover all the deep-seated blocks that are preventing you from living your most authentic, powerful expression with money and out in the world. So if you're interested in joining, you can go ahead to consciouseconomics.ca and click on Mindfulness and Money to find out how to sign up. There's also a free trial option for those of you that want to dip your toe in before making a commitment for the year. The program is designed to be a democratized access for financial coaching and financial therapy. We have some very accessible pricing for you with options within as well, so that you can make your own conscious decision what you are able to afford as you start this healing journey. We hope to see you there. Body image. Do you want to go into that? So I don't know why. It's so interesting how these little subconscious beliefs get sewn into the back of your mind. Okay, so body image, you're like, okay, where are we going with this? I'll tell you my version of it. So I grew up, and my best friend, her name was Erin, and her father is very, very vocal about weight. And she was very, very different than me. I was very developed very early. I just kind of fluctuated with my weight. And she was like very tiny and very traditional, like little girl. When we were 12, she looked like a 12-year-old and I looked like I was 16. And so he constantly would kind of criticize my weight. And he was also very wealthy. And somehow I correlated these two things together. And I felt that I would not be able to be financially where I wanted to be unless I was at a certain weight. And if my weight fluctuated, then I wasn't worthy financially. And you helped me uncover this, and it was really strange. And like, so to the point of, I would restrict like, oh, I want to go on this vacation one day, but it's too nice there and it's too like luxurious, and I have to be a certain weight in order to go to it, which is really weird. And this is my own weirdness. But what I'm trying to say is that so many of us have all of these programs around why we're not good enough, why we're not worthy enough, why we can't have the things that we want. And this is one of them, and it shows up here. And so this is like a really interesting one. And there's also stuff around like someone's height dictating that they get more salary. Like these are real things. Like if you look at CEOs, generally they're like tall and
I wonder if there was research around that.
There is, yeah. I don't know it and I can't cite it, but I did read it somewhere.
But what comes to my mind is the relationship you have with money is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. So money is usually a secondary problem to a primary issue that's actually taking place. And that primary issue is somewhere around the emotional baggage that we carry, which shows up in areas in our life that are usually that's where we start seeing patterns. So we talked about sex earlier. Food is another one. A lot of the times our relationship with food, which obviously reflects on the body image we have, is also mirrored in the relationship we have with money. And so these are some of the things that we can reflect on, like how am I showing up in life, period, and what are the emotions that I'm trying to communicate with these different behaviors? Because we get to the root of the emotion, and then we'll understand how we're using money to communicate that emotion, how we're using food, and then these patterns become so clear that you'd be like shocked that you haven't seen it before. For me, my relationship with food was many lifetime ago. I've come a long way since, but I struggled with bulimia, which is an eating disorder, and it was a binge purge. Like you either go on like a very strict diet where you like don't eat anything, or you just like eat every single thing on the table that it's completely unhealthy. And that was also the relationship with money. I would like save every penny and never save it, or go blow it away in an afternoon. It was very unhealthy polarities that I had to deal with. So just kind of reflect on that, because the relationship you have with yourself and your self-worth is a nucleus out of all these conversations that we're having.
That's very powerful, and thank you for sharing that, because that's not an easy thing to share.
Nervous system. Ta-na-na-na.
Most of us, when we talk about money, our nervous system automatically becomes dysregulated because it's stressful. That's why we avoid it, a lot of us, and we don't want to look. I was doing work with a major investment firm association, mutual funds association, and they were on a campaign to try and get people to open their statements. So these are your own investments. They're sending the statement, and most people will not open them. They throw them out. How many have done that? Okay. And it's true. And it's like, why? That's your money. You're investing it and you don't want to look. And the reason why, and I was very much this, I classify myself as a financial avoidant big time. I don't like looking at it. I'd rather and prefer somebody else look at it and just tell me what the problem is and I'll fix it. But the interesting thing about it is because the nervous system becomes dysregulated. And for me, I used to tell myself in business that the reason why I couldn't, so my accountant, she used to come in, it was actually really brutal. She used to come in at the end of the week and give me this thing called the State of the Union. And she'd be like, here's the State of the Union, and put it on my desk. And it was like cash flow, what's coming in, what's coming out, what's in the bank account, like just so I would know. And I avoided it like the plague. And the reason why is because if I looked at that freaking thing, then I would be spun out. I'd go into the weekend spun out. I'd have a shit weekend where I'd be stressed, like nobody would be having sex. And then I would not be able to have the gusto that it would take to be, going out and doing sales calls and doing, like, I have to be positive. I have to think something's good coming or I'm not going to be able to keep it up. And that's literally what it was. So I convinced myself that ignoring it and not looking at it was better. But just like anything that you ignore, that little skeleton that's tapping at the door in the closet, that's my image. I actually wrote a song about this. I'm like, honestly, like the monsters that are in the closet, our money monsters, which Aseel has a whole thing about, are not as scary as we think they are when we actually face them. And what I realized is when I started to actually look at it and I started to actually see what was going on, as difficult as it was, I could actually develop a plan and not be living in this seesaw limbo land of like, I don't know what's going on. Maybe it'll work out. Who knows? Hop. And it just is better to have a plan. So that's my nervous system story, is like, how do we regulate our nervous system around money? And you have some really good advice.
Regulating your nervous system actually helps you save money and make more money. And let me tell you why. So whenever our nervous system is not regulated, that means our emotions are taking charge. And that's when we are engaging in impulsive buying. That's when we are engaging in impulsive habits, period. Buying could be one of them, could be overeating, could be anything that we do that's impulsive in our lives, over consuming Netflix. And these are the things that naturally lead to leaks out of our bank account without us noticing, because we're trying to not deal with whatever emotions coming up for us. So naturally it creates this leak out of our bank account. But the other claim that I'm making, that nervous system regulation also helps you make more money, because when you regulate and you're back in the present moment, you're now activating the prefrontal cortex of your mind again, which is where your logic is. This is where you can start making more strategic decisions. This is where you can start making logical moves, be it in your business or career, and naturally respond to life versus react to life. And that's naturally how you can grow in your career. So it's important to recognize quite literally how being dysregulated impacts us. So a lot of the tools around regulation involve the breath, and we do a whole bunch of them here. But I'm curious which one Jackie is.
Well, no. So you've always been kind of sharing with us that in order to start building a new relationship to your budgeting, money dates.
Money dates. Yeah.
So do you want to share money dates?
Yes.
Yeah.
So whenever I'll talk about myself from my personal experience. Whenever I associated needing to sit down and do anything related with money, be it plan for my budget, cash flow, or pay bills, or talk to someone about money, naturally I was like really, really uneasy in my body. And I started creating this opportunity for me to like change the environment in which I'm doing these things. So just look at what we have around us here. A lot of these items or elements are actually part of my money dates, including plants, candles, and think about your five senses. What can you introduce to your five senses? Things you can touch, smell, eat even. Actually, the sense of smell is the fastest to regulate your nervous system. It's the fastest out of the five to get you in the present moment. So think about like aromatherapy and things you can smell that feel personal to you. And by that, you're rewiring what you are associating money with. So now you're associating money with calm, with ease, with things you enjoy.
So we'll light the candles. We'll have really nice music playing and smell something good. And then we'll look at that freaking bill and freak out.
When my partner would walk in, I'm like, don't worry, baby, it's a money date. He'd be like, confused a little bit because I'd have like everything going on and literally trying to regulate myself in a way where I start associating sitting down and doing money tasks with things I enjoy. I even did this with clients. Clients sometimes would hesitate to come and see me, but I started like creating behavioral modifications of like, what would this client like at the end of our meeting? And it could be like a latte that we go buy together or something like that, like a reward system for yourself as well. And it just helps reinforce that habit.
Mm-hmm. I think it does work. And I know because Jackie said it does. And she's been doing it. I think
should tell me that.
Before we end off and open up the floor, if anybody has anything that they want to share or say, I just want to take a beat for a second and acknowledge that right now we are in a very, very extreme time in the world. And we're laughing and we're joking and we're speaking about very serious things. We're talking about things that you would traditionally talk about in therapy, and we're doing it in this light way because we've done a lot of personal work that we're at the level where we can talk about it that way. But I want to just take a little pause for a minute and say that when we are in a situation, and I've been there many, many times, where we don't know how we're going to pay our rent, when we don't know how we're going to be able to cover the cost of something that we need to, do for our children, or when we don't know if we're going to be able to take that sick day even though we're actually sick because we don't know what it's going to do to our budget and what we're going to do in our life. These are real challenges that so many of us have experienced, are experiencing, and will continue to experience in this volatile economy that we're in. So while we're talking about these things and we're, bringing some lightheartedness to it, there's a very easy story that says, well, this isn't practical because these are the actual realities of what I need, and I don't have time to think about it in this way. This seems fun, not for me. I got to figure it out another way. And I want to invite you to realize that there's a trap there. And that when we actually dig deeper into what we're talking about and some of these topics and actually start to witness our patterns, sometimes it's not easy to think about your money pattern, but you can start to reflect on your relationships, or you can start to reflect on your food, or you can start to reflect on some of these things and just see where the thread is, where the connection is. I know it seems out there. I know it seems strange, but if we're going to reroute things, if we're going to be able to invite more stability into our lives financially and our businesses and the way that we operate, we've got to excavate some of what's in there. And that's what this is really all about. And so the mindfulness in money, there are many, many resources available that are online that you can do right away, no cost. On the QR code on the little insert in your book, you can just scan and go directly, and you can try some of these exercises out for yourself and check it out. And if you want to, or you feel like you're ready to go deeper, Aseel and I have created now the Mindfulness in Money. It's a 1-year long program. And you actually work through the different layers with us in community. It's extremely accessible, and we also offer full scholarships thanks to Interact. So if you don't feel that it's accessible for you to spend $30 a month, then come and email us and come into the community. We invite you. We will cover it. We want people to actually, the only way you're going to see it works is if you actually start and try it. It's so easy to conceptualize. It's not easy to conceptualize, sorry. And it's so easy to say, okay, fun and great, but I actually have bills to pay. So what am I doing? And what we have seen over and over and over again when the work is applied is that people are actually earning more, that people are actually getting things like they never thought that they would. And that's why we do it.
Marriages are saved. Like
Marriages are saved.
Yeah,
yes.
There's different ripple effects that can happen out of this work. But to give you a quick synopsis of how this membership work or designed, the first year is a pilot, so it's foundational. It's applicable to everybody. Every month, there's a theme that we're exploring about money and the intersection of money, of one of the topics that you've heard us talk about today, but also ones we haven't covered. So like money and spirituality, money and relationships, money and passion, and different things. So every month you receive a lesson around the money piece, but you also receive a mindfulness tip from one of our wellness coaches, because we believe so much in the co-creation. So we have a community creating these products and offerings for everybody to benefit from. And on a monthly basis, we also meet virtually for a group coaching component where we can get to share and go through certain exercises together to deepen our work around that. You also have personal reflection tools to help you integrate some of the things that you're learning and reflecting back on how it applies in your own personal life. And we have a community board, and our hope is, while this is digital and a lot of our community is going to be global, we do want to activate in also personal events like this one, for example, where we get together in person and do workshops, experiences, experiential work together. So this is our first launch, and this is our pilot, and we just launched this month. So this is why we invited you to witness the start of this journey together.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking a chance and talking about some stuff that isn't traditionally talked about. Again, I don't know what the vibe is, and I get really uncomfortable when I say, does anyone have anything to say? And then no one does, and I keep talking.
Okay, we have somebody here. Do you wanna come over?
So first of all, I do acknowledge collective healing, and I feel that for us to actually move forward, we need to heal as a collective on all levels. But I'm always struggling to understand how we can, when there's systematic issues, and that's what's holding us back from moving forward. How is your work related, or how can your work influence or impact some of the systemic structures that when I am in such a space and I want to heal, sometimes I feel let down and I feel like, okay, maybe I don't have the time or the space to heal, because I know no matter what I do, the systems and policies are not in my favor and not helping me. So I'm always in that survival mode.
So beautiful question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
that. That's my sister.
Thank you so much for that. This is a big one, and one that, we spend a lot of time thinking about. And obviously there's no one size fits all solution to what's going on, because it's an accumulation of so many things that has brought us to this particular point in history. So it's cumulative when we think about what our current economy looks like and how in the foundations of what it was built upon, which unfortunately we don't like to think about those things. But when we think about colonization, when we think about residential schools, when we think about slavery, when we think about racism, when we think about about systemic inequities. So this is extremely overwhelming, and what's going on in the world continues to rev up our nervous systems of how overwhelming it is. And so there's the feeling of hopelessness that many of us experience, and again, start to then discredit things like this because it feels too big, so then we freeze. And one of the things that I really deeply practice myself, and one of the foundational things that I really believe, is that we can't go out there and change it all. No one individual, no group of us can go out there, and no matter how hard we scream, no matter how hard we cry, we can't change it all. It's going and it's moving. But what we can change, what we can do is this. We can go inward. We can excavate, where am I holding up those values within myself? Where am I holding values that aren't aligned with the world that I want to see? Where am I making decisions? Where am I lying? Where am I holding back? Where am I convincing myself that it's not possible? And how can I pull it out of me? How can I pull, we internalize racism, we internalize patriarchy, we internalize all of it inside of us, and then we function that way. And we recreate the biases that we think are put upon us. I remember doing it as a young woman in business, thinking in my head, everyone in this boardroom thinks I don't belong here. So what I did is I shrunk and I tried to hide because I was embarrassed of it. But in reality, I can't read people's minds. I'm just assuming based on what I know, what I think I've heard, what the vibe feels like. But when I started to go in and actually do my own inner work and show up as me, myself, it doesn't matter. Here I am. This is it. Something starts to change. So the answers and the solutions that we need for the world and the economy that we need to build urgently are resting inside of us at a higher level of consciousness. We cannot solve today's problems and issues and challenges using the same mind that created them. We have to be able to elevate. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to go inward, is to start to actually heal internally first. And that's how we heal the systems. That's how we heal. And it will be generations.
Absolutely. Sometimes we forget that we created the systems. Like, the systems are ultimately an extension of our value system. And so that's something we say very much in conscious economics. The economy is an extension of our value system. So we need to remind ourselves that the work does start within us. And once we bridge these gaps within us, we'll also start aligning with places that honor who we are. And we start creating that, because whatever is manifesting in our world outside is a mirror to what we need to learn, be it a relationship or a career or a company that we're stuck in. So as long as you're continuing to see that, there's something within you that is calling to attend.
Yeah, it's challenging. It's a challenging time right now. But it's interesting too, and I don't want to go on a rant, and I already have, but what I'll say is that it's very easy that we assume, business people don't care, or these people don't, or, this is not how it works, or I'm never going to be able to do that. And the reality is that when you actually come out and you start to actually speak to people and cross out of your own boundary of what you think you know, which is why at Conscious Economics, we're always like, look around right now. Look at all the mix of everyone that's here, like all ages, all backgrounds, all different kinds of careers, all different styles and ways that we think and breathe and feel coming together. And when we look around, we all are happy to be here together. And so the assumptions that we make, every business, big major business person doesn't care about the world. That's not true. Or corporate is this. No, it's not. There are people just like me and you everywhere. And if we start to actually open ourselves up and believe and start to ask ourselves the question, not how bad is it going to get, how fucking good can it get? How fucking good can it get? If we actually start to work and try, it can get good. I want it good. I want it good for my kids. I want it good for all of you. And it's going to take generations to clean this place up. Generations. But it has to start now. Look at it. We have got to start. So come on over.
Anybody else would like to ask or share?
Jay
Yes,
would like
absolutely.
something. Please, come on. This is my amazing friend who's an incredible entrepreneur as well, an artist, and he makes all my incredible hats. And so he made this. His company is just around the corner, Coup de Thé, and he and his team are unbelievable. And my husband is wearing one of the originals as well. So, yes.
I wanted to kind of revisit a little bit of what we talked about on the podcast, and also just from the conversation we had after I came to the event that you spoke at. It is, as a small business owner, a lot of times you kind of feel siloed. There's a lot of shame built around that asking for help. It's why I'm here tonight, is to be a part of a community that can talk about these things and to be able to start opening those conversations to talk about finances and all of those different things, which is something that like I very much struggle with. I try to avoid it like the plague. Very fortunately, my sister is my business partner and is very good at those things, but it's something that like I've just recently had a conversation with her about, being like, I am going to be there and be your partner in this. I will do this, but it's something that I've always avoided and made excuses where I don't have the time because of the creativity required for all the other things. But the question I have around it is, when you feel you're in those siloed situations and the kind of shame that is surrounded around talking about the hard things about being a small business owner and those things, what are like tools that you suggest to be able to start kind of opening yourself up more to those things? And also, it was the conversation that you and I had when I said, I'm really bad at asking for help. And it was something that I was like, I want your help. I want to speak to both of you about where my business can go. And I want to be able to think beyond what I think, where I have to do it all myself. And I think that that's something that, like, from talking to other business owners, that we feel a lot of the time. So your suggestions on how to approach that and break that cycle of I have to do it all myself.
How's your relationship with receiving?
Not good.
So the reason I ask is sometimes we think we struggle in one area. You struggle in asking for help when your real struggle is receiving anything. So you can't ask for something you're not ready to receive. So it could start with as simple as a compliment. Like, you know, how do you respond when someone gives you a compliment? We tend to give the compliment back as soon as we get it. But see how simple that is, just the compliment, and how comfortable it makes us. Now think about, like, I need financial help, I need financial advice, I need business coaching. Like, we need to start thinking about what is it about ourselves that we're uncomfortable to receive, and how can I shift that in the little micro moments on a daily basis that will eventually open me up for more. So I have more to say, but I want to pass it on to you.
Well, no, thank you so much, Jay, for bringing it up. And there's so many of us in the room that are entrepreneurs and small business owners in the room. And yeah, it's a real thing. Jeff does so much research around this, that one of the biggest things that holds entrepreneurs back is this feeling like we have to do it all ourselves, and that no one can do it like we do it, and no one cares the way we care. And so it's like we can't pull ourselves out of it, and you can never scale and you can never grow when that is happening. And so many of us end up always being small business owners when our dream is to be large business owners. And so what we really have to do is learn how to receive, like Aseel said. And one of the things I was saying to you, which is a teaching coming from our work, that our attachment style, so one of the things you can do is look at how do you deal with an emotional situation, a fight, a conflict. So there's a spectrum of ways that we can deal with it. There's the avoidant side, where we kind of want to just get out of there. We don't want to talk about it. We want it to go away. Or there's the side where we're really anxious. We want to figure it out right now. We want to talk, like, we have to get right to the bottom of it. And so with that scale and spectrum, that same scale and spectrum shows up with money. So if we're emotionally avoidant, if we don't really like to get into the hard stuff, chances are that shows up with money. And I speak from personal experience. So like Jeff and I are doing so much incredible work in our own relationship container around this, and like really learning for me how to express like what I even need, because most of the time I won't even ask, and I'd rather like hurt myself than ask, was literally what it was. So somewhere along the way, that conditioning was picked up, and that's where it starts. So it's not like, hey, like, let's do a budget. Like, because you won't use it. Like, we could write one and you'll fucking never use it. Like, that's just what happens. Yeah. And then you'll feel more shame and you'll never talk to me again. And then I won't have another hat. So, yeah. Well, we're making freaking sure. So we'll start with like a small compliment, and like maybe like your wife can rub your arm and see if you can handle it. Sorry.
No, but you were saying something. I forgot the phrase you used, but when you're not asking for help, you're already saying no to yourself. That's what's happening in that moment. So one of the things I'd love for you to reflect on are, what are the no's you grew up hearing that hurt, where you're still stuck at? Because you're carrying these no's with you right now, and that's why you're scared of asking.
Jay was on the Conscious Economics podcast, so we're going to drop that episode very soon. And actually, our editor was listening to the episode, and he was like, this is an amazing episode. And the reason why is because you were so open. And I know, because I know the spirit of how you operate, and you build so much space for other artists, for community. You're giving back, you're opening yourself up, being like, hey, I know I've got an incredible business and you all think it's like the best thing ever, and I'm still dealing with some of these things. And you're opening up that space to people, which is so beautiful. It's also your comfort zone of the giving again and again and again, which I do the exact same thing. So I understand and get it. And I think by us even stepping into the space and opening up, that's how we start. So like, you've already started. It's so awesome. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe we have one more?
Yeah, we have time for one more if there's anyone.
Thank you. So my question is involving new relationships. And I'm just wondering if you have any guidance in trying to find a person that's compatible financially with you. And if there's any advice you have in terms of that.
Whoa. Aseel, that's for you.
Damn right. That's a beautiful. I'm actually very proud of you for asking that question.
That's an amazing question.
That really is. The shifts in the generational thinking is absolutely beautiful to see people more aware of these pieces. So it's absolutely a big piece, because the number one reason for divorce is financial struggles and anxiety and the stress that has on the relationship. So to be proactive in how we approach that is widely important. So who here is familiar with attachment styles? See, like 5 years ago, who heard about that? Now we're talking about the nervous system, about the inner child, about the attachment style. So certainly there's a shift in the consciousness that we're collectively being exposed to. But we're actually going to be adding this on our website. It's a quiz that tells you your attachment style with money. But just like you have an attachment style with a person, and an attachment style, it's how we relate, the lens in which we see the world. Oftentimes, it's very similar in how it shows up with money. So there's 4 attachment styles. Marie mentioned that briefly earlier: the avoidant, the anxious, the disorganized, and the secure. So often, think about it, in there's 2 moments where your attachment style is the most heightened, and that's the moment of separation. So in this aspect of relationships, when you're departing ways with your partner, and the reconnection. These are the 2 times where your anxious style is the most heightened. So is the case with your finances. Like, what happens when you depart ways with your money, be it spending, or you lost it in an investment, or whatever the case, whatever departure took place, and what happened when you're making it, and how much you think about it, how important career is for you, etc. So having awareness on your attachment style is a really important key piece, because it will support you in conflict resolution. It'll support you in knowing how to navigate and plan for conversations to be proactive.
And you usually attract in partnership the opposite of what you are.
Yeah.
So you do.
You do.
It's you're hot for it for some reason.
Yeah.
You attract the opposite.
That's why opposite attracts.
Yes.
So it's important to have awareness on how you operate and how she operates, or they, or your partner. So that's important. The second piece, it's important to understand your values. Like, what are your values? And to start discussing these things openly ahead of time. Like, one of the questions, for example, is like, how would you feel when your partner starts out earning you? How would you feel if you want to downsize because you prioritize, other aspects of life over earning money? Like, it's important to know what are your priorities and make sure you're aligned on that, because it's going to reflect in many of the decisions you make on a financial basis. How you make money, how you spend money, how you manage money, and all these pieces. So the value piece is important. So attachment style, values, and how it shows up in money. And the third, I would say, is just being open to not just for therapy, but for growth and coaching together, like educating yourself constantly and trying to revisit these things, because they change. Just because you're this way today doesn't mean you're going to be this way in a year from now. We continuously evolve. So having the ability to constantly schedule these conversation points along the way and supporting, making sure you're still going towards the same path together. So these are a few things I have.
I would just say too that obviously in dating and starting out with someone, it's awkward, right? Because it's like, how do you approach this? So I think first understanding these pieces for yourself, like Aseel said, are you someone who sees down the road you want to go back and do your PhD, and there's going to be a period where you're not going to be earning as much because you're going to be doing that? Or maybe you want to be a digital nomad and you want to live abroad and you want to be able to have a smaller lifestyle that can move around. Like, these things are important to understand when we're getting into relationship, so that we see if those dreams are aligned. And then as you're feeling more seriously about someone, saying, hey babe, I think it would be so beautiful and hot if we could talk about what we really want, like what our dreams are. What are your financial dreams? How do you categorize yourself with money, and be honest about what you have? Because I think that that's one of the things we did in our mindfulness and money program for women. We talked about two things. When women start out earning their partners, there is definitely issues that come up statistically, which it's interesting, but there's issues that tend to arise. We also did something around financial infidelity. So financial infidelity is when we are not being honest about where we're spending or what we're spending to our partners. And it is really, really a normal behavior. Like, I was doing it a lot when I was growing up. I would amalgamate shopping bags. Like, I was shopping a lot and I would pretend that this was on sale when it wasn't, or I'd put a bunch of bags into one bag and try to tell my partner that it was just this. And it was my own money, but I was still not being honest because I felt guilty about what I was doing, because I was shopping to numb. I was shopping to whatever. So it's really interesting how these things come up, and they do wreak havoc on our relationships. So having that open, honest conversation, just like we would about any other valuable thing in our life, is so important. It's awesome that you're thinking about that. Yeah, we love it.
She's a lucky one.
Very lucky, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed being a part of that event with us. If you are local in Canada, in Ontario, I invite you to actually sign up at consciouseconomics.ca to our newsletter and become a subscriber, so you can find out when these events are happening and you can actually physically participate. If you are someone who is not local, we will continue to air podcast episodes where we invite you into some of our community activations like the one that you just heard. So I hope that you got a lot out of that. I know I did. I know that our community did. And we invite you to share your feedback with us. Tell us what's resonating. Tell us what you would like to hear next in terms of this dynamic and conversation around money and conscious economics. So with all of that said, we hope you have a beautiful holiday season, and we will see you again on the next episode of the Conscious Economics